Namaste, and welcome to this monthly Satsang Q&A. And this is volume 15 now. So every month, I try to answer as many questions as I can that have been sent in for reading out and answering. And you might want to use this if you have a question about awakening, about the process of awakening. If you can't make it to a live satsang, of course, if you can, you're more than welcome to ask there live. Or sometimes if you're working or the time zones don't work out, or it's a question that you'd rather, or something you'd rather send in that is anonymous, you wouldn't like your name behind that. So you have that option, and we'll put the link to find a page to submit questions underneath this video in the description also. So as always, my dear brother Anish is going to help by reading the questions for me. So we'll dive straight in. We'll see how many we can get through. And yeah, whenever you're ready, Anish, thank you.
First question. Sometimes I find myself clinging and attaching to religion. I sometimes wonder when I investigate deeper, is it a safety net because I was never taught to value my own thoughts? Or because if I attach to this religious thought pattern, I'll get the things I want in life? How do I navigate this when deep within I do see this embodiment of allowance and deep faith, but my former religious patterns interrupt?
Yeah, it's something very common for all of us. We have certain ways that our mind will think in repetitive patterns. You could say that the mind is very attached to what's familiar to think about, especially if something has been repeated over time, like focusing on a particular religion. If we also might be scientifically based, also, if we have a particular hobby or interest, the mind is going to keep thinking about things that are regular for us or have been in our lives for a while. And in fact, it doesn't really need to impede our awakening. In fact, it can be handled one of two ways, really. And maybe you might want to look at both of these. The first thing I would suggest is to perhaps look at the similarities. Each religion or faith has within it the truest seed of what we're looking at here in awakening. And the only difference perhaps would be that in awakening, in a path such as this, we're more interested in actually experiencing that real self rather than believing in it. We want to experience it and prove that we are it already. So instead of seeing it as something as separate to this, maybe we can look at, my own journey. I had to, well, I didn't have to, but I wanted to come back around and look at the faith that I was introduced to when I was a child and to see the commonalities in that, to see that the message in that was the same, um, modified slightly, but the same message that we're looking at. There is only the one formless reality or Godhead or whatever you want to call that, the one consciousness, the one presence. So it doesn't really need to be an impediment at all. It could be something that helps. And then from our meditation or a self-inquiry perspective, we can use any thoughts at all, whatever they're about, to help us deepen our practice. And our meditation here in this particular teaching, we're using any phenomena at all to bring attention back to what is watching that phenomena. So your thoughts about the previous faith and practice you had, you can notice that something is seeing those thoughts. You must be here first to see those thoughts arise, to see those old ways of thinking. And, in our self-inquiry, we can also inquire into who it is that has these habitual ways of thinking. What is it that is watching the mind? What are we, in fact? Are we the thinker? Is there a thinker of thoughts? So for me, that was really, really helpful. And eventually, everything that we experience is really a benefit to our pathway, to our journey, and can be used as part of that, especially, in fact, if it's something that's unwanted in that process, seemingly like repetitive thoughts. That same devotion that we might have had to a faith or a religious practice that we might still have, it is still the same devotion to the ultimate truth. It's the same devotion, just shifting to a different place. So I hope that helps. I would really suggest looking at both of those if it feels right to you, looking at both ways. Thanks, Anish.
Next question. Hi, Helen. I stare into the emptiness of the room, and yet shapes still appear, like waves of energy. I suppose my visual mind doesn't completely shut down and becomes creative. Shapes appear, dots, silhouettes, brief figures. Space begins to function as a screen. It's pleasant to watch. It's like explaining how matter forms by seeing it, as if it were the first step in densification. On the other hand, I tell myself that if I look at them too much, they intensify. If I let them go, they dissolve on their own. Am I right? I love you.
Thank you. Love you too, and absolutely yes. Whenever we're aware of the formlessness, and I'm assuming here that you are referring to when we do the meditative practice by noticing the contextual field, where we look at the space around a particular object and we notice that that space is really not limited at all. It's quite common when we do that some people might notice a more fundamental type of form, so the vibration or not the solid, the forms don't appear quite so solid. So if I'm um, taking in the space around this laptop, for example, if my attention is on the formless space, the formless presence around the laptop right now, then the form doesn't quite feel so real. It's still here, of course, and I'm still using it, of course. But we might find that the shapes seem more fluid, and maybe we even begin to be aware of the fact that they're really just vibration, not really forms at all, even though they look solid and feel tangible to our human senses. So as you noticed here, just to keep your attention, bring your attention back to that formless space around even these subtle objects. If you focus on the objects, they will seem ever more real and proliferate in your experience. If you instead use them as practice to bring attention back to that which is here around this invisible field of consciousness, then they're useful again in your practice. Anything can be used to focus on. Just like a thought, we can see a thought is appearing inside something which is formless. Thought comes and goes, and is useful to help point us back to that in which it appears. So just treating it like any other phenomenon, there's really no difference in terms of our meditation practice and our awakening between these very subtle shapes you're describing and a table or a chair or a human body. Really, they're all um, good fodder for our practice of bringing attention back to what is real. Thanks, Anish, when you're ready.
Next question. Dear Helen, many thanks for your wonderful presence and teachings. About 4 years ago, I really got it that my thoughts and mind are the primary source of all my suffering. I began to question my thoughts, eventually reaching the place where I leave virtually no thought unquestioned. The result has been great increase in freedom from suffering for myself and those I'm close to. However, I feel I've reached a plateau, and I think I understand that this is also a story. Certain recurring thought patterns feel so entrenched that even though I see that they are merely products of my conditioned mind, they return frequently. causing unpleasant emotions. Almost all of them are variations on picking on people in my head. These are people I love who aren't toxic or dysfunctional in any significant way, just humans with quirks and flaws like all of us. I feel stuck and would like to move past this pattern. Any wisdom you can offer would be very welcome. Thank you again.
Yeah, it's very normal that as the mind begins to get a little quieter, we would notice those thoughts that are very repetitive and recurring. And they have these themes, as you pointed to, ways of thinking that are very entrenched. But I'd like to offer something here that will be useful. And you said that these thoughts cause certain emotions. What if it's the other way around? What if there are emotional energies still in the system that are reflecting as these thoughts, these repetitive ways of thinking? So, for example, if I feel guilty, if I feel inadequate, if I feel an emotion of guilt, for example, then I've got to kind of somehow do or behave in a way to feel guilty about unconsciously. So I might find myself judging people, being too critical on people, whether it's verbally or in my head. I'll have to play that sense out that I'm not good enough actually. So what we do here is we look at these emotional energies as a deeper layer rather than trying to change the content of the mind directly. The emotional energies we look at and we ask the emotion what it's trying to tell us. And there's a deep-seated unconscious belief that is so believed still. Of course, we might see it's not true at all, logically, consciously now, this belief. But somewhere deep down inside, our separate sense of self is still really, really buying this. And we can feel how much we're buying this belief by how strong the emotion is. We could say there's an unconscious belief and an emotion and a way that we're manifesting that belief. Here we're talking about some repetitive thoughts. So when I looked at guilt, it said to me that I'm just not good enough. There's something wrong with me, something flawed about me. And so we use a process here called contemplation, where we turn that into a question. We directly challenge it, knowing that we can't really do anything about these thoughts that you're describing directly in your head. We also can't really do anything directly about the emotion. We can feel it, of course, but it's going to keep coming, and so are the thoughts, unless we look at what is really underneath the most primal root of this emotion and these superfluous thoughts. That is this idea, whatever it is for each of us. So there's a whole section here on the YouTube channel called Contemplation, playlist on it, actually, I mean. And we've even done some contemplation workshops that you might want to check out here. And it shows you how to take an emotion, check out what the belief is underneath it. What would that emotion say to you? And then we question that consistently for 30 days, 5 or 10 minutes every day, allowing all the answers inside, thoughts and emotions, sensations, answers from the outside, sounds in our environment, other people, other things. And when we're questioning this belief, we can't be believing it. So we don't have to feel the emotion that comes from believing that. An emotion is just a state of consciousness or a level of energy that we've put a name on, such as guilt or fear or anger. And that is a particular name for whatever vibrational state is produced in the body when we believe a certain thought. So if we believe that we're not safe, for example, we feel something called fear, which is really just an energy. Same with anger, same with guilt. So I guess I would suggest checking out the contemplation section here Rather than looking at trying to deal with the thoughts you've talked about directly, but check out what the emotion is and then look for the belief underneath that. Let me know if you need any more help with that, if you need to write back in. Thanks, Anish.
Next question. Helen, thank you for being in my life and speaking to me so clearly. I am 68 years old and I'm constantly suffering because what I need with all my heart is to awaken. Helen, could you please help me understand what this means? You are consciousness becoming aware of itself. If consciousness is everything, why does it need to become aware of itself? Thanks, Helen, for your help.
So it's very, very normal. I was stuck on this for a long time. What does it mean that we are consciousness becoming aware of itself? Well, consciousness in its purest appearance, we could say, is unmanifest. And as the unmanifest, it hasn't yet become anything. And it doesn't actually then even need to recognize itself, paradoxically. It just is. It's everywhere, formless, consciousness, everything, as you pointed to. There's no one, no person there to even need to wake up to the truth. And then when it begins to play as form, as shape, it's experiencing itself in all of those shapes as a fly and a bird and a fish and a tree and a human being. And when it plays with being a human being, it starts to be able to think about itself and discern about things. And it forgets, seemingly, in the mind at least, it forgets its original nature as the formless unmanifest. So the unmanifest formless consciousness still is completely intact. But in the form, the mind and the body, it gets confused about itself. It starts to think it is a human being, not actually consciousness appearing as a human being. It starts to think it is just a human being, a mind and a body. So it is that aspect that is really waking up, coming out of illusion. There's some process going on in a way, isn't there, of awakening? But it is watched also by this formless, unmanifest consciousness that hasn't yet become anything and always remains completely in its entirety intact as it is. So even when it really becomes a human being, takes the shape of a human being, still it is consciousness appearing to be a human. He still hasn't actually changed. So we start to realize that more and more. Every form that's arising, from the smallest to the biggest, is consciousness in disguise. Pure formless consciousness looking like something. Then it becomes clear what that waking up process is. Consciousness is beginning to recognize itself, firstly, as I am not actually a form, I am formless. And all forms are arising out of me, the consciousness. And then it goes a little stage further and begins to realize actually all the forms as well are not different to the formless consciousness either. They are only appearances, not actual things. So this body, this laptop, the chair I'm sitting on, your body, everything is just consciousness looking like something, but not actually that. As if all we had to make the universe out of was pure, unmanifest consciousness. Everything might look like a house and a car and a tree and a thought, but it's actually just consciousness in disguise. So we mean when we say consciousness is beginning to recognize itself, recognize that it's still actually just formless consciousness, and that there is nothing else other than formless consciousness. So maybe have a listen to that a few times and let it digest and right back in if you need a little extra help with that. You're doing absolutely great. Very auspicious that you would ask such a question, even. So, awakening is definitely happening for you. Might not be in a way that your mind can recognize, but you wouldn't be asking questions like this if it wasn't already deeply, deeply underway. So, hope that helps. Thanks, Anish.
Hi, Helen. I have been wondering about weight. I would love to lose some weight. I have been tuning into the silence and stillness that I am. And some curiosity came up as to where my weight story comes in. Is this created around the thoughts when I'm eating? What makes the difference of bodies that are slim and others that are overweight? And then, what is the best way to create a shift? Would it be questioning the mind when thoughts come up around food and coming back each time to the truth of the formlessness of who I am? Thank you, Helen, for your love and showing me the way with love.
And thank you. And for in my own journey, weight and losing weight was often a big, no pun intended, definitely, a big issue because um, for me, for a long time, I was trying to change the way my body looked and the shape of my body and everything. But actually, it became clear that the way my body is a reflection or um, a representation, we could say, of what's going on within the consciousness, what's going on within our thought structure. And quite often, if our body is showing us something, it's because we aren't really aware of it on a conscious level. What does that mean? Well, there's thoughts that are being believed that are so believed that felt so true as a separate being when we thought we were a person that we wouldn't even really question them. So our body's having to tell us, first there'll be some emotion that the body's telling us in a form of an emotion. There's something that needs looking at. But again, quite often we couldn't do that when we thought we were a separate being because the emotions felt too strong, too overwhelming. And then it's showing us in some physical way as well. And that can be our body, as you've pointed to. It could be something in our work, our relationships, our family, finances, anything. So when I looked at this issue myself, I found that it was really underpinning a sense of deep shame. I looked at my body and the way it was, there was a sense of shame, a real deep. My mind said, I'm ashamed of the way my body looks. If for you, it might not be shame, it might be anger. I'm angry that I can't, seemingly that I can't change my body, can't make this work. Or fear, if I can't manage to lose weight, something's going to happen to my body. And here in this teaching, we're looking at the outer world, the experience with our body here in this case, and the emotion is being symptoms of something much deeper underneath. So we use a contemplation technique. And again, you can check this out here on the YouTube channel. There's playlists just devoted to contemplation itself. Seeing that the issues with the body are a reflection of an emotion, which is a reflection of a deeply rooted belief. So I didn't feel ashamed of my body, in fact. My body was the way it was, overweight, because there was still a sense of shame. The shame had no external cause. I wasn't ashamed of or ashamed about something. There was just shame. And then we look at that emotion and ask what it wants to tell us. And deep-seated belief underneath that feels very true at first, even though we're seeing ourselves to be the formless consciousness. This belief still felt very, very true. For me, shame said that I don't deserve to exist. And it's quite shocking because at that point I was deep into my self-inquiry and beginning to really see who I am. So what we're doing really is using the things that are happening in our experience to show us that there might be an emotion that needs looking at. And shame was a quiet, sneaky one for me. Wasn't really a loud shouting emotion like fear or anger. Easy to kind of ignore, feel it momentarily and then push it away because it didn't feel good. So we look at the emotion, we find the idea underneath that emotion, and then we question it for 30 days using the contemplation practice. And I've already described it in two previous answers here, contemplation, so I won't go through it again just to save time, but you might want to check out the previous answers to the questions and also um, the contemplation playlist here on the channel. And then the emotion begins to lighten in itself, and the way it's reflecting in our body begins to. I can't have a healthy, slim body if it's going to make me, it's going to accentuate my joy if I really feel deep down that I shouldn't be here or I don't deserve to be happy or something like that, whatever shame is going to tell us. My experience with my body and my life has to reflect what I'm holding on deeply inside, maybe not even aware of. So we can thank the body for telling us that there's something to look at. And to thank the emotions for telling us there's something to look at. Of course, we don't want to keep experiencing it, but we can be grateful for the message that we didn't even know was in there. For me, certainly, I didn't know. And we're just clearing up these habitual old ways of thinking in our contemplation that feel so true for the separate sense of someone that we thought we were, but are really not true at all for who we actually are, the one formless presence. So, hope that helps. Thanks, Anish.
I love to listen to you via YouTube, and sometimes it makes me so relaxed that I fall asleep. I have a question. Can you please shine your light on this situation I'm in? I am 63, and for 43 years, I have lived with my husband, and we have two lovely grown up sons. Last year, it so happened that I learned that my husband is on the autistic spectrum, and a few months later, I also learned that I am highly gifted and highly sensitive. This explains a lot why all these years I often was in despair and wondered what exactly is happening here. It was and is painful. It is now more than ever clear to me that we are not compatible. Recently, we have talked it over many times in the most clear and honest ways, and my husband still keeps on hoping I will stay with him. As I see it, we both learn something profound from this, and it takes some more time to unfold how the future will manifest and what it will bring. And maybe we go through this not only for ourselves to learn or to heal, but also for other family members and sisters. And does this maybe accelerate my awakening? What can be said about all this from the viewpoint of existence? Thank you for your response and for all you give and share with love.
And thank you for your kind words. So glad that you find it relaxing. Um, what you've shared here, it's a big revelation, isn't it, to find out these things about yourself, about your husband after being together for so long. And of course, there will be an adjustment. But I would urge you before you really make a decision and feel that you're not compatible, to really give yourself time to adjust to what it really means. From the perspective, let me start that again, from the perspective of awakening here. What's really happening is as we deepen in our journey and recognizing the formlessness that we are, there begins to be a re-embracing of the form, which is arising from formlessness, not different to formlessness. And in that re-embracing, we can begin to accept things about ourselves that perhaps we didn't and couldn't before as a seemingly separate person. And so we can appreciate the individuality of how these two body minds, you and your husband, are appearing and expressing. And sometimes when we have a kind of a diagnosis like this, there is ability to actually accept even more. That perhaps it's not that this person won't change or won't be a certain way. It's maybe that they can't be different than they are, just as you can't be any different. I can't be any different. All of us. So taking some time to explore what it means for both of you. And I'd also suggest in any relationship that is going through some challenges, um, to look at what you think you need from each other. So it's easy for us to need someone to be different or want someone to be different because somewhere inside we're looking for something from them. So in my relationships, my awakening asked me to go through all of my relationships, actually one by one, to look at where I was trying to get something. Am I looking for security from this person? Approval, love, respect? What is it I'm unknowingly asking for? And feeling that if they would just change to be this particular way, that I would feel a different way. So, in my own close relationships, I was always looking for security, for people to make me feel safe or needed or respected, valued, all of those things. So it's a good idea to gently make a list of what is it you're actually looking for from your husband? Are you expecting him unconsciously, of course, we all do, to make you feel a certain way? And he in turn will be expecting you to make him feel a certain way. And as part of awakening, we're going to have to realize that nobody out there can give us what we want to feel, not permanently anyway. Maybe for a tiny moment, but it will always be that we feel insecure then because our happiness or our worthiness or our validation or our security will be dependent on someone else. And life is asking us to find that security, that approval, that love, that recognition inside our own self. So only when we've done that work, so it's simply a case of being honest and with a pen and paper and just what am I looking for? If my partner would be the way I want them to be, how would I feel then? And that's really what we're looking for then. I would feel safer, I would feel more loved. So, okay, what we're looking for is security and the feeling of being loved. And then we can ask it, is that true that it's not here already? Life is asking us to switch over this mechanism that didn't even really work in duality of asking those near us to give us what we want and actually starting to allow it to come from the inside out, from the knowing of who we are. And you find yourself in a peculiar but beautiful place in your marriage where you don't need anything from each other at all. This will work even if it's just you on the path and you do this work. And then, only then, when you don't need anything from your partner, will you know if you're actually supposed to be together to stay together. And I've had to do this myself in other relationships. So it's definitely coming from my own experience. Life asked me to start looking inside for everything I was shopping for on the outside in my relationships. Really, what we're speaking about here is moving from conditional love. Unknowingly, we all love conditionally, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love you if you make me feel this certain way, is what we're silently saying. I'll stay with you if you make me feel this way. To unconditional love and even non-dual love, which has no prerequisites at all. I love you simply because you are, and I know who you are, what you are on the deepest level. So maybe don't make any big decisions until you've had a look at this and see what comes out of it. It might be quite surprising. So I hope that helps and sending lots and lots of love. Thanks, Anish.
Next question. Hi, Helen. After many, many years of seeking, maybe 11 or 12 years, I feel tired. Last year, there was a very clear, undeniable seeing of my true nature. The body mind was all autonomous, and whatever it is that I am fundamentally was only seeing. Since then, I have continued to inquire, meditate, and keep looking, but it's all becoming tedious and not interesting anymore. I wanted to ask, after a clear seeing, maybe seeking more insight is causing tension, and I'm wondering if just stopping everything would be a better path. It's like the seeker has lost its drive to seek, as there really isn't anything to even find. I hope this isn't depressing for others to hear. Thank you and love to all.
Thank you. And it's not depressing at all. It's actually describing what happens as the seekingness falls away. That we're not attending satsang or meditating, etc., doing self-inquiry, contemplation, in order to get anywhere anymore. That drive is falling away. And it might seem like there's no purpose or reason for practice, for our spiritual practice then. And it's the same for me for a long while. I felt like somebody had taken the oars away from my boat. I was just kind of, what now? There seemed to be no direction to head in and no point in heading in any direction, which can sound very much like apathy, but it really isn't. It's just that the mechanism that has driven our spiritual search up until that point has fallen away or is falling away, and we don't really even know why we're meditating. If the self is already here, this formless consciousness, as I seem to be calling it today, why the need to do any more practice if we've seen that? If we've discovered ever clearer who we are, what is the purpose of any further practice? And it's really that the reason for practice changes. And you'll see this emerge over the next few days and weeks. And you can facilitate this even faster by asking, why am I practicing? Why am I doing this practice, in fact? What is the purpose of this practice? And not in the mind's way, not in like, why am I even bothering? But from the curiosity of the consciousness, the real self. Why am I meditating now? And something else began to emerge for me that I hadn't noticed before. It was there, but I hadn't really noticed it. And that is a love of myself, the self, the consciousness. I'm meditating because it's just so nice to rest as my real nature more and more. I'm inquiring in my self-inquiry because it's delightful to see yet again that I'm still free, completely free already. I'm contemplating because it's delicious to see that I'm already free and have always been free of these karmic patterns. They don't belong to me. They belong to the imaginary separate person that I thought I was. So it's more of a delicious enjoying and tasting and discovering of the depths of seeing that can happen when the seekingness or the seeker, imaginary seeker, isn't driving that journey. You get a taste of it, hopefully. What is it like to just sit down and meditate for no apparent reason at all? Well, we could say it's just what the body wants to do, right? The body comes to sit to meditate and to enjoy rather than trying to get somewhere. And actually from there, the practices are so delicious, delicious, delicious. And it keeps showing us ever deeper the layers of the identity of who we thought we were falling away. And you've mentioned one here unknowingly, perhaps not really aware of it. Even this question, let me just, I'm wondering if I just stopped everything, would it be a better path? So can you see here that there's still a belief that you can choose whether to do or not do spiritual practice? And a sense of a separate being who's choosing what spiritual practice to do. Even here, this sense of a doer, an imaginary doer and chooser is functioning and playing out, right? And we don't have that capacity in who we really, really are. So it's something to look at when you notice the question arising. And our practice is going to reveal these ever more clearly to ourselves in a part of our journey that is we're exploring for fun, we're practicing for fun, but it's also going to show us these very, very subtle ideas that I'm pointing to here. So, can you choose whether to stop? Did you choose to start these practices, or are they just happening spontaneously by themselves? So, I hope that helps. Thanks so much.
Next question. I've listened to the extra classes on the body, and I would very much like you to clarify this for me, please. I understand that emotions are different frequencies from high to low, and also that our energy takes from a subtle form, intention thought, to more and more dense form, ending in the body and the outer world. Is that from high vibration to slow vibration? How are they connected if they are? We all have the experience of a body, a slower, dense vibration, regardless of how we feel, high or low vibration. Can you say that we slow down our vibration by, that is, eating too much? Or that if we feel good, high vibration, we would eat equally lighter? I hope I have explained it understandably.
Yeah, it's easier if you realize that all these kind of vibrations are here at the same time, just like the colors of a rainbow. We would have all the colors of those rainbow colors present at the same time. You can't have just the reds and oranges without all of the rest of them. So what we're looking at here, energy of desire, would be a higher frequency, as you say, and then there'd be an emotion attached to. We'd either feel good about our desire or we'd feel bad in some way, some kind of negative emotion. So it'd be a slower frequency. And the negative emotion would be even lower than the positive emotion. So there's my desire vibrating really high, a thought, an energetic form, and then an emotion, how I feel about that desire. And either feeling good because I really feel I can have it, or feeling bad because I don't believe I deserve it or something. I don't feel I can have it. I feel limited. And then some physical manifestation of that desire is already here. So either in the form of what we do want or what we don't want. And how we feel in the emotional part of it is going to determine whether it's showing up as what we do want or don't want. So if you start to think of these stages, we could say they're not really stages because they're all the same vibration showing up three different ways: energetic, emotional, and physical. And we start to think of them as just kind of uh, gradually shifting in vibration, gradually shifting in energy. When we don't understand that our unconscious beliefs can really inhibit the manifestation of our desires, for example, then our body will feel a lower vibration, which is what we're calling a negative emotion. The actual belief, the idea that we're not good enough, is actually a lower vibration anyway, a thought form. And then the emotion that comes from that, the sense of guilt or unworthiness or something like that, in this example, would also be a lower emotion. So from that place of that low vibration, we can't allow our desire to show up in a way that we want. And we'd also notice other activities going on that match that lower vibration, such as thoughts that we do not really want, thoughts about not being good enough. And we'd also notice behaviors coming from there as well. So when we're experiencing that kind of lower vibration, we're much more likely to choose foods, for example, in an example that you're giving, that is not really that all that good for the body, all that healthy for the body. And if we were instead feeling, wanting something and feeling really good about it, knowing it's a done deal, it's on its way, I'm not really worried about it at all, then the actions, the words, and the behaviors of the body mind are going to be of a higher quality. We might find ourselves drawn, in example of food, to things that are much more useful to the body and helpful to the body and healthier. So whatever's going on the body level is a reflection of what's going on in energetic form, um, our soul, if you want to call it that, and then in the mind, the thoughts, and then in the emotions, and then in the physical. So you can think of them all as being the same, the soul, the emotions, the mind, the body, the physical body. They're all bodies in a way, each one more tangible than the previous one, till we end up with a physical, tangible body. So I hope that answers your question, but if you need some more help with that, please just write back in. Let me know what you've understood from what I've said, and we can go further into it. Thanks, Anish. I think this is the last question we'll have time for today.
Hi, Helen. I have wanted to share, teach, coach my own concept for years, but I cannot bring myself to any consistent actions in order to get going. I'm so blocked, yet also so inspired that it almost hurts. I've tried to drop it, throw everything out, but as soon as I feel good, I am massively inspired and I cannot help stop myself from writing, etc. But when it needs to take real form, when I need to go deeper, when I need to really share, make an offer, etc., I am full of resistance. It seems impossible to either let it go or do it. Can you please talk a bit about this?
Absolutely, yeah. And thank you, Anish, for reading the questions for me. I appreciate it. So the inspiration to create something, whatever that something is for each of us, is different. It's a very high frequency energy, and it comes from a place where there's also joy and a lot of life force energy, we could say. When you feel inspired, actually, even the root of that word is inspirited. There's a lot of spirit there. There's a lot of passion, a lot of life force to create something, and it's going to um, express itself somehow. But what happens for most of us is that we haven't really examined the deep-seated ideas that felt true for us as an imaginary separate being. And we thought we were a person. It made sense to feel that we weren't safe. And the presence of fear was not surprising, right? We feel fear many times. It made sense to feel that we don't feel we're adequate or good enough, and the presence of guilt or even deeper shame. Um, it is, very self-evident for us. Same with anger, we might feel very limited, blocked by something held back as a separate being. None of these things are true for who we really are. But until we notice they're there, we can't really question them using the contemplation technique. And if you want to know more about contemplation, I've mentioned it a few times here in this video. Check out the previous answers here in this video, and also check out the contemplation playlist on the YouTube channel. There's so much resources there, so many resources to work with. But in terms of your question here, any belief that we're still holding on to will inhibit the flow of creativity and inspiration into form. So what you're describing happened exactly the same for me. There was such inspiration in how to teach this, and I wanted to write books and things like that. Every time I sat down to write, the ideas were there and then nothing would come out, or something would come out, but it wasn't in the shape that I wanted it to be. And the creativity, as it started to flow, it was stopping and starting all the time, more stopping than starting. 6 weeks stopped and then 2 minutes of starting. It was so frustrating. I began to realize that any belief that I'm holding on to still is going to bring down that level of inspiration to a place where it can't really express itself. We are not a vibration, we're formless consciousness, but the body is a vibration. So any belief is going to affect that. A belief is just a thought that's been given a lot of attention and is vibrating. A thought is vibrating like everything else in manifestation. So I had to really look at the ideas. How can I write a book that brings me such joy to express if I don't feel good enough on the inside? It's not really going to work, is it? How can I experience success in my outer world if I don't feel safe? It's not going to work if I am exposed to a lot of other beings if I don't feel safe inside. So I had to really question these and work with them in contemplation. And then I wrote 9 books in 2 years, which is pretty crazy looking back. But obviously something, it moved then from inspiration and creativity being something that started and stopped to something that's just always there. And I'm writing a book again now. And the flow is constant, unimpeded. It's just there whenever I have time to sit and write. It's not something I have to let flow even. I can't stop it flowing. And there are an infinite number of creative ideas, some of which will be acted upon by the body, some that won't. And this is true for any, I mean, I'm talking about writing books here, but anything we're creating, whether we're cooking a meal, building a house, performing major surgery on someone, it's all a form of creative expression. When I was younger, and my children were younger, trying to feed a family of four on a budget, 4 children on a budget, was an art form of creative expression. And so, whichever way we're expressing, that creativity is going to be there, but it might be impeded for us. You can't let go of this because it's what you're supposed to do. You also can't let it flow completely because there's these ideas in the way. So, what are your emotions that you feel? And have you looked at them with contemplation? All we need to do is to bring attention away from those thoughts and towards what's really true using the contemplation process. You'll find that the inspiration starts to flow sporadically at first, but then for longer and longer periods. And then it's just constantly there, like oxygen in the air. It doesn't really go away ever because it's who you are, not something you're doing. Creativity is the function of manifestation, right? Creation of forms is ongoing. You're constantly creating thoughts, emotions, appearances, everything. So again, I hope that helps. And thank you once again, Anish, for reading the questions for me. I appreciate it. And thank you for joining me in this monthly Q&A. We'll be back towards the end of next month with the next volume. And again, if you have a question that you'd rather me answer, these questions, as you've noticed, are all read out anonymously. Or if you have a question but just can't make it live to Satsang, which we hold, everyone's welcome to join our free open Satsangs on Zoom. You can find information at on the website, which will be linked underneath this video. There'll also be a link to the page to submit your question underneath this video as well. So you're welcome to join us, and also more than welcome to join our community. We have a large and growing community of like-minded beings who are all pursuing this path, the greatest of all paths towards truth. Everything's easier when we do it together, right? So thank you for being with me, and I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. Sending lots of love to you all. Namaste.